I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Donna Harris, a 65-year-old widow living in a quiet middle-class neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona. The Arizona sun has been my companion for decades, warming the garden where I grow daisies that remind me of my late husband, Robert. He passed away 10 years ago, leaving me with 2 sons who mean the world to me. Mason, my eldest, is a hard-working architect always buried in his blueprints and projects. He lives just 3 blocks away with his wife Chloe and my precious grandson Oliver, a spirited 7-year-old who inherited his grandfather's mischievous smile. Ethan, my youngest, followed his childhood dream and became a pilot. Watching him in his uniform for the first time filled me with the kind of pride that makes a mother's heart swell beyond what seems physically possible. My days revolve around Mason's family, especially Oliver, and the peaceful routine I've built in this house filled with memories. It was a Tuesday morning like any other. The kitchen was filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and toast as I rushed to finish the breakfast dishes. Mason had left for work early, his coffee mug still warm on the counter. Oliver, that clever little rascal, had been picked up by the school bus just moments ago, his lunchbox packed with his favorite peanut butter sandwich and apple slices. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, had just gone upstairs. Her soft voice floated down to me. "Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower." I nodded and smiled, though she couldn't see me. Chloe Bennett came into our family 5 years ago. I still remember their wedding day, a beautiful ceremony in her parents' backyard. Though the Bennetts weren't wealthy, they'd spared no effort to make everything perfect. Chloe had walked into our lives with a confident smile and bright eyes, as if she'd been born to be the perfect wife and mother. I had just put away the last plate when the landline rang. I dried my hands on my apron and hurried to answer. "Hello," I said, tucking the receiver between my ear and shoulder as I wiped down the counter. "Mom." "It's me, Ethan." His cheerful voice immediately brought a smile to my face. "Honey, what a lovely surprise. How are you?" "I'm good. Mom, just calling during my layover at the airport. Thought I'd check in." Hearing his voice felt like a warm hug. Ethan always found time to call me, despite his busy schedule flying across the country. "How's the flying going? Are you taking care of yourself?" I asked, unable to stop myself from mothering him, even though he was 35. He laughed that hearty laugh I loved so much. "Everything's great, Mom. Work's going smoothly." Then his tone changed, becoming hesitant. "Hey, Mom. Something really weird just happened." "What is it, honey?" I asked, my hand pausing on the counter. "Is Chloe at the house right now?" I was puzzled by the question. I glanced toward the stairs where I could still hear water running in the bathroom. "Of course she is. She's upstairs taking a shower." "Why do you ask?" There was a long silence on the other end, so long that I could hear the airport announcements in the background. "Mom," Ethan finally said, his voice now deadly serious. "That's impossible. I have her passport right here in my hand. She just boarded my flight to Paris." I laughed, thinking he must be mistaken. "Oh, honey, you must have seen someone who looks like her. I just spoke to Chloe less than 10 minutes ago. She's wearing that white blouse she always wears around the house." But Ethan didn't laugh. He didn't respond with his usual playful banter. "Mom, listen to me," he said slowly, as if trying to put his thoughts in order. "After all the passengers boarded, I realized I'd forgotten some paperwork and ran back to the gate. I found a passport on the floor near the boarding area. I was going to hand it to the airport staff, but when I opened it to see who it belonged to, I froze. My heart began to beat faster, but I tried to stay calm." "What do you mean?" "Ethan, the passport has Chloe's photo, her full name, Chloe Elizabeth Bennett Harris, her date of birth, everything. There's no mistake." "Are you sure?" "Ethan," I asked, a thorn of uneasiness pricking me, "that passport could belong to someone else." "Mom," Ethan sighed, his voice a mix of confusion and certainty. "I just went into the passenger cabin to verify. She's sitting in first class next to a man who looks very wealthy and polished. They were leaning close, talking intimately, like they're a couple." His words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen, gripping the phone. My head began to spin. a couple impossible. I had just heard Chloe's voice from upstairs. I had seen her in this very house, in the flesh. At that precise moment, the sound of running water stopped. I heard the bathroom door open, and Chloe's voice came down the stairs. "Mom, who is it?" I panicked. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. "Just a friend," I replied quickly, my voice betraying me with a slight tremor. I hurried into the living room to avoid Chloe's gaze as she peeked down from the stairs, her hair still wet. Closing the door behind me, I whispered into the phone, "Ethan, I just heard Chloe. She's here. She just finished showering. Are you absolutely sure about what you saw?" Silence fell again. Then Ethan's voice turned firm. "Mom, it's impossible. I'm looking at her right now on this plane. The flight is about to take off. Mom, something isn't right." I hung up the phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the receiver. The living room suddenly felt suffocating despite the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. I collapsed onto the couch, trying to take deep breaths, but my chest felt heavy with questions that had no answers. If Chloe was here, who was the woman on Ethan's flight? And if the woman on the flight was Chloe, then who was the person in my house? A few minutes later, Chloe came downstairs. She was wearing a clean, light blue dress, her hair damp and falling in gentle waves around her shoulders. She smiled with her usual sweetness. "Mom, I'm going to the market early today. Do you need any vegetables or anything?" Her voice was kind and familiar, as if nothing strange was happening. I looked at her, forcing a smile, but inside I felt like I was carrying stones. "Yes, dear, some tomatoes, please," I replied, my throat dry. Chloe nodded, took her wicker basket, and walked out. I stood watching her silhouette disappear behind the gate, a whirlwind in my soul. I didn't believe Ethan was lying. My son had no reason to invent such a story. He had always been an honest, sensitive boy who cared deeply for his family. But Chloe, the daughter-in-law I had lived with for years, had also been right in front of me, unmistakable. Could there be something I'd missed? Some secret in this house that an old woman, had never noticed. Chapter 2, Strange Occurrences. I sat in the living room as the midday sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting soft stripes of light on the tiled floor. The old armchair where I always sat to read stories to Oliver seemed heavier now, as if weighted down by my troubled thoughts. Ethan's call kept replaying in my mind, every word like a hammer blow to my heart. I looked around at the family photos on the wall, Mason and Chloe on their wedding day, newborn Oliver, and Ethan's radiant smile when he first put on his pilot's uniform. Those memories now seemed covered by a haze of doubt. I thought about Chloe, the daughter-in-law who had always been the perfect model in my eyes. Beautiful, industrious, always impeccable from the way she dressed to how she cared for Oliver. I had thought myself lucky to have a daughter-in-law like her. After Chloe left for the market, I remained seated at the kitchen table, unconsciously gripping the edge of the tablecloth. Ethan's call had made me re-examine small details that had seemed normal before. There were days when Chloe would leave the house saying she was going to the market or to visit a friend, but when she returned, she seemed different. One day she was all sweetness, hugging Oliver and singing him to sleep. But on other days, she was irritable and would snap at me for simply misplacing the salt shaker. I used to attribute these changes to the mood swings of a young woman. But now, I wasn't so sure. My heart felt knotted, as if someone was playing with all the memories I had cherished for so long. I remembered once, a few months ago, when Chloe picked up a pen to write the grocery list with her right hand. Her handwriting was straight and neat. But the next day, I saw her using her left hand, and her writing had more flourishes, as if she wasn't accustomed to it. "Since when do you write with your other hand, dear?" I had asked. She laughed and quickly replied, "Oh, just for fun. Mom, I'm practicing to be ambidextrous." I had nodded without giving it much thought, but now that detail had become a splinter in my mind. Lost in these thoughts, I barely noticed when the front door opened and Oliver ran in, his backpack bouncing. "Grandma," he exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "My teacher gave me a gold star today because my drawing was the best." I stroked his head, trying to smile. but the weight in my chest remained. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Oliver sat down and pulled out his notebook to show me. Grandma, look. Yesterday, Mom helped me with my homework using her right hand, and her writing was so pretty. He flipped a page. But today, she wrote with her left hand, and it came out all messy. See, the boy pointed to 2 pages in his notebook, one with well-formed letters, the other with crooked ones. I stared at the handwriting, and my heart sank further. Your mom must have been busy today. Oliver, she was probably tired, I said, trying to hide my growing unease. But Oliver looked up with his innocent eyes. Grandma, Mom is so weird sometimes. Some days she hugs me really tight and reads me 3 stories, but other days she barely looks at me. My grandson's words were another stab to my heart. I hugged him close, trying to comfort him while my mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. Just then, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Eleanor Wilson, my neighbor of 15 years, standing there with a casserole dish that Chloe had borrowed last week. Stella, your daughter-in-law is such a dear, she said with her usual warm smile. But then she lowered her voice. Though I noticed something odd yesterday, she handed me this dish with her left hand, and I could have sworn you once told me she was right-handed. I forced a smile. Maybe she's practicing with both hands. Eleanor, would you like to come in for tea? She nodded and joined me, but her comment was like another thorn in my already troubled heart. After Eleanor left, I sank onto the couch, my hand on my chest. I wasn't imagining things. Even the neighbors had noticed the inconsistencies. That afternoon, I went out to water the daisies I'd cared for over the years. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. But my soul couldn't find peace. The words of Oliver, of Eleanor, and Ethan's firm voice on the phone kept circling in my head like pebbles thrown into a calm lake, creating ripples that wouldn't stop. I was watering the plants, but my mind was elsewhere. Am I too old now to notice the strange things happening in my own house? I whispered to myself. Or have I been deliberately turning a blind eye, wanting to believe in the happy family I always dreamed of? Chloe returned from the market carrying her wicker basket. What caught my attention was that she was holding it with her left hand. I remembered perfectly that Chloe always used her right hand for everything, from chopping vegetables to combing Oliver's hair. What did you buy, Chloe? I asked, trying to sound casual while observing her closely. She smiled politely. I got some tomatoes, cilantro, and fresh fish. I'm going to make that roasted fish you like so much tonight. Sound good? Her voice was soft as always, but I couldn't help noticing her hands. The left one, no. Now she was using her right. I nodded and turned away, pretending to wipe the table. But my heart was racing. Was I imagining things? Or were these small details trying to tell me something at dinner? The whole family gathered at the table. Mason was tired after a long day at the office, but still smiled at Oliver and asked about his day at school. Chloe ate slowly, delicately, and turned to Mason. Honey, don't forget the parent-teacher conference is next Tuesday. Make sure you take the afternoon off. I looked at her, trying to find the daughter-in-law I had been so proud of. But in my head, Ethan's voice kept echoing, she's sitting in first class next to a man. I bit my lip, trying to swallow my anxiety, but it felt like a stone lodged in my throat. Just 3 days later, everything felt different. Oliver dropped a glass of water during dinner, and the water splashed over the tablecloth. It's okay, sweetheart, I said quickly, grabbing a towel. Just be more careful next time. But Chloe, sitting across from him, suddenly frowned and snapped. Oliver, why are you so clumsy? Be more careful. I was stunned. I looked at Mason, who also frowned. Chloe, it was just an accident, he said quietly. She turned to him with a flash of anger in her eyes. You always defend him, and I end up looking like the bad guy in this house. The atmosphere at the table grew heavy. Oliver lowered his head, his eyes filling with tears. I hugged him, feeling a deep ache in my heart. Only a few days ago, Chloe had lovingly reminded Mason about the school conference, and now she seemed like a completely different person. I sat beside her, watching in silence, trying to piece together the puzzle in my mind. Today she was irritable. The other day she was sweet. Today she used her left hand. The other day, her right. These small differences were piling up, one by one, like pieces of a much larger secret. Chapter 3, Oliver's Perspective. A few days later, I took Oliver to school. He held my hand as we walked down the familiar cobblestone street lined with flowering jacaranda trees. Suddenly, he stopped and looked up at me with those clear blue eyes that always reminded me of his grandfather. "Grandma," he said in a small voice. "Yesterday, Mom helped me with my spelling homework, and she was so patient. She even drew little stars next to the words I got right." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "That's lovely, dear. But this morning," he continued, his voice dropping, "when I asked her to check my math, she said she was too busy and told me to figure it out myself. She didn't even look at my paper." I knelt down to his level, my knees protesting, but my heart aching more. "Your mom was probably just busy this morning. Oliver, don't be sad." He nodded, but his gaze remained troubled. "Sometimes I think I have two different moms. Grandma, the nice one, and the other one." His words sent a chill through me. I hugged him tightly, feeling utterly powerless. He was only 7 years old. How was he supposed to understand something that I myself couldn't figure out? As we continued walking, my mind drifted back to when Chloe first entered our lives. Mason had met her at a charity event where his architecture firm had donated design services. He had come home that night with a light in his eyes I hadn't seen since before his father passed. "Mom, I met someone," he had said, his voice full of wonder. "Her name is Chloe, and she's incredible." 3 months later, he brought her home for Sunday dinner. I remember how she had charmed us all, complimenting my cooking, asking Robert's favorite recipes, showing genuine interest in Ethan's flying stories. She had seemed perfect, beautiful, intelligent, and kind. Their wedding had been a joyous affair. I still keep a pressed flower from her bouquet in my Bible. When Oliver was born 2 years later, Chloe had been a devoted mother, spending hours rocking him, singing lullabies, documenting every milestone in a baby book with her neat handwriting. When had things started to change, I couldn't pinpoint an exact moment, but over the past year, something had shifted. The inconsistencies had been subtle at first, small changes in mannerisms, preferences, handwriting, but now, with Ethan's shocking call, those small discrepancies suddenly seemed significant. "Grandma, we're here." Oliver's voice pulled me from my thoughts. We had reached the school gates where other children were streaming in, lunchboxes swinging. "Have a wonderful day, sweetheart," I said, bending down to kiss his forehead. "Remember, Grandma loves you very much." "I love you too," he replied, hugging me once more before running off to join his friends. I stood watching him until he disappeared into the building, my heart heavy with questions I couldn't answer. That evening, Mason came home earlier than usual. He found me in the kitchen preparing dinner, a simple beef stew that had been Robert's favorite. "Where's Chloe?" he asked, loosening his tie. "She went to her book club," I replied, remembering how she had left the house dressed in a stylish green blouse I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She had been sweet and cheerful, kissing Oliver goodbye and promising to bring him a treat. Mason nodded, pouring himself a glass of water. "She's been so busy lately, always running off to something, book club, yoga, shopping with friends." He rubbed his eyes tiredly. "Sometimes I feel like we're ships passing in the night." I hesitated, stirring the stew slowly. "Mason, have you noticed anything different about Chloe recently?" He looked up, brow furrowed. "Different how?" "I don't know exactly, just changes in her behavior. Her moods." Mason sighed, leaning against the counter. "She has been more stressed lately. One day she's her usual self, and the next she's snapping at the smallest things. I figured it was just work pressure. Her marketing firm is handling some big new accounts." I nodded, not wanting to alarm him without more concrete evidence. But inside, my suspicions were growing stronger. Later that night, after Mason and Oliver had gone to bed, I sat at the dining room table and took an old notebook from a drawer. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote the first entry, Tuesday. 3:00 p.m. Chloe leaves for the market in white blouse, Returned 6:00 p.m. Still cheerful and kind. Wednesday, 4:30 p.m. Chloe snaps at Oliver over spilled water, uses left hand to write grocery list. Thursday, 7:00 a.m. Chloe refuses to help Oliver with homework. Mood distant. Thursday, 3:00 p.m. Chloe leaves for errands wearing green blouse I've never seen, very cheerful and affectionate with Oliver before leaving. I didn't know what I was doing exactly, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending nothing was happening. Each entry was a stroke of my doubt, as if I was painting a picture I was afraid to look at fully. The next morning, Oliver came down for breakfast wearing mismatched socks, one blue, one red. "Honey, your socks don't match," I said gently. He looked down and shrugged. "I know. Mom helped me get dressed today and said it doesn't matter if they match. But yesterday she made me change 3 times because my shirt was a little wrinkled." I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. Another inconsistency to add to my growing list. After Mason left for work and Oliver for school, I was alone with Chloe. She was humming softly while washing dishes, using her right hand to scrub a stubborn pot. "Chloe, dear," I began carefully, "I was thinking of taking Oliver to the Children's Museum this weekend. Would you like to join us?" She turned, smiling brightly. "That sounds wonderful. Mom, Oliver loves that place. Remember how excited he was about the dinosaur exhibit last time?" I nodded, watching her closely. Last time we had visited the museum had been 6 months ago. Oliver had indeed been thrilled by the dinosaur exhibition, pointing out each specimen by name, his knowledge surprising even the guide. Chloe had taken dozens of photos, documenting his excitement. "Yes, he couldn't stop talking about the T-Rex for weeks," I said, testing her. "The T-Rex was his favorite," she replied without hesitation. But I remembered clearly Oliver had been fascinated by the Triceratops, not the T-Rex. He had even bought a small Triceratops figure from the gift shop that still sat on his bedside table. A chill ran down my spine. It was a small detail, one that could be dismissed as a simple memory error, but combined with everything else... "Mom, are you okay?" Chloe asked, noticing my expression. "You look pale." "I'm fine, dear," I said quickly. "Just a little tired." She dried her hands and came over to feel my forehead. "No fever, but maybe you should rest today. I can handle the housework." Her concern seemed genuine, her touch gentle. Looking at her beautiful face, her kind eyes, it was hard to believe anything was amiss, and yet the evidence was mounting. After she left to hang laundry in the backyard, I added another entry to my notebook. Friday, 9:30 a.m. Chloe doesn't remember Oliver's favorite dinosaur was Triceratops, not T-Rex, using right hand today, mood kind and attentive. I sat staring at the page, my thoughts in turmoil. What was happening in my family? Was I losing my mind? Or was something truly wrong with my daughter-in-law? Chapter 4, Confiding in Rachel. By the following week, my notebook contained dozens of entries documenting Chloe's inconsistencies. The pattern was becoming clearer. It was as if 2 different people were taking turns being Chloe. One kind and patient, the other irritable and distant. One right-handed, the other left-handed. One who knew intimate family details, another who made small but telling mistakes. I needed to talk to someone. My thoughts were becoming a prison, each new observation adding another bar to my confinement. I called Rachel Davis, my best friend since we were young mothers comparing diaper rash remedies and sharing recipes. We had weathered life's storms together, marriages, children, Rachel's breast cancer scare, my Robert's passing. If anyone would listen without judgment, it would be Rachel. "Let's meet at Rosie's Cafe," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to talk to you about something important." "Is everything all right, Donna?" Rachel asked, concern evident in her voice. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "That's why I need to see you." An hour later, I sat across from Rachel in a quiet corner of Rosie's, a place we'd frequented for decades. The familiar scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls usually brought comfort, but today nothing could ease my troubled mind. Rachel looked much the same as she had when we first met, her silver hair now replacing the auburn, laugh lines deepening around her kind eyes. but the same steady presence that had always been my anchor. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath and began my story. Ethan's call, the passport, the woman on the plane, and all the inconsistencies I'd been noticing with Chloe. As I spoke, I pulled out my notebook and showed Rachel my observations. "Look at these entries," I said, pointing to my neat handwriting. "Monday morning, Chloe was right-handed and knew Oliver's teacher's name is Mrs. Henderson. Monday afternoon, she was left-handed and called the teacher Mrs. Anderson. Tuesday, she cooked Oliver's favorite mac and cheese perfectly. Wednesday, she added onions, which she knows he hates." Rachel studied the notebook, her forehead creased with concern. "And you're absolutely sure about all these observations?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I've been documenting everything, and it's not just me noticing. Oliver has mentioned it too, and so have neighbors." "Have you talked to Mason about this?" I shook my head. "I've hinted at it, but how do I tell my son I think something is seriously wrong with his wife? That sometimes I wonder if it's even the same person." Rachel sat back, her coffee untouched. "What exactly are you thinking, Donna? That Chloe has some kind of mental health issue, multiple personalities?" "I don't know," I admitted. "At first, I thought maybe that was it. But after Ethan's call," I lowered my voice. "Rachel, what if there really was another woman on that plane? What if there are two women who look exactly alike, both pretending to be Chloe?" Rachel's eyes widened. "That sounds like something from a movie. Donna, it's pretty far-fetched." "I know how it sounds," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. "But how else do you explain a woman identical to Chloe boarding a plane to Paris while Chloe is supposedly at home with me?" Rachel was silent for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "What does your gut tell you? Donna, you've always had good instincts." I looked down at my trembling hands. "My gut is screaming that something is very wrong, that my family is in danger, that Mason and Oliver are being deceived somehow." "Then you need to find out the truth," Rachel said decisively. "Not just for your peace of mind, but for their safety." "But how if I confront Chloe directly? She'll deny everything. If I tell Mason my suspicions without proof, he'll think I'm losing my mind." Rachel leaned forward. "You need evidence, concrete proof that can't be explained away." "Like what?" "Follow her," Rachel suggested. "The next time she says she's going somewhere, follow her and see where she really goes. Take photos if you can." I hesitated. The thought of spying on my daughter-in-law felt wrong, invasive. "I don't know. Rachel?" "Donna," Rachel said firmly, taking both my hands in hers. "You can't live like this, consumed by doubt and fear. If your suspicions are wrong, no harm done. You'll have peace of mind. But if you're right, you could be protecting your family from something serious." I knew she was right. The uncertainty was eating me alive. I had to know the truth, whatever it might be. "Okay," I said with a determined nod. "I'll do it." As I drove home, Rachel's words echoed in my mind. "Trust your gut, Donna. A woman can't fool another woman easily, and a grandmother's instinct to protect her family is one of the strongest forces in nature." Back at home, I found Chloe in the kitchen preparing dinner. She smiled when I entered, the picture of a perfect daughter-in-law. "I made your favorite chicken pot pie, Mom," she said cheerfully. "And I picked up those lemon drops you like from the corner store." I thanked her, wondering which version of Chloe this was, the kind one who remembered my favorite candy, or the irritable one who had snapped at Oliver yesterday for leaving toys on the stairs. "Where did you go today?" I asked casually, putting away my purse. "Just some errands," she replied vaguely. "Post office, drugstore, you know." I nodded, not pressing further. But in my mind, I was already planning. The next time she left the house, I would follow her. I would discover where she really went and what she was hiding. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The following morning, after Mason left for work and Oliver for school, Chloe announced she was going to her yoga class. "I'll be back around noon," she said, picking up her yoga mat and a small gym bag. Today she was wearing a pale yellow floral dress I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. I waited until she was out of sight, then grabbed my car keys, a scarf to partially hide my face, and my cell phone. My heart was pounding as I backed out of the driveway, feeling like a character in one of those spy movies Ethan loved as a teenager. Chloe walked briskly down our street, but instead of turning right toward the yoga studio as she normally would, she turned left, heading downtown. I kept a safe distance, thankful that Phoenix's busy streets made it easy to blend in. After about 10 minutes, Chloe hailed a taxi. I followed in my car, maintaining several vehicles between us as the taxi headed toward a part of town I rarely visited, a working-class neighborhood with older homes and small businesses. The taxi stopped in front of a row of small apartments. Chloe paid the driver and walked quickly to the third building, disappearing inside. I parked across the street, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. What now? I couldn't just barge in after her. I decided to wait and watch. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I was about to give up when the door opened, and Chloe emerged, but she looked different. She was wearing a blue blouse instead of the yellow dress, and her hair was now loose around her shoulders. She walked in the opposite direction, not even glancing toward where I was parked. I made a quick decision and followed on foot, keeping my distance. Chloe, or whoever this was, stopped at a small cafe and met a man. Even from my position across the street, I could see he was handsome and well-dressed in an expensive-looking suit. They embraced intimately, then sat close together, holding hands across the table. My breath caught in my throat. Was Chloe having an affair? But something still didn't add up. The handwriting changes, the left hand, right hand inconsistency, Ethan's call about the woman on the plane. I took out my phone and snapped several photos of the couple, my hands trembling. Then I returned to my car and drove home, my mind racing with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. When I arrived home, I was stunned to find Chloe in the kitchen, wearing her yellow dress, chopping vegetables for lunch. "You're back early," she said, looking up with a smile. "Yoga class was canceled. The instructor got sick. I thought I'd make a nice salad for lunch." I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to speak. How was this possible? I had just seen her, or someone who looked exactly like her, at a cafe with a strange man. She had been wearing a blue blouse, not this yellow dress. "Mom, are you okay?" Chloe asked, concern in her voice. "You look pale." "I'm fine," I managed to say. "Just a little tired from running errands." I retreated to my room, locking the door behind me. With shaking hands, I checked the photos on my phone. There she was, clearly visible. Chloe, or her double in a blue blouse, holding hands with an unknown man. I sat on the edge of my bed, my world tilting on its axis. This wasn't just mood swings or odd behavior. Something much stranger was happening, and I needed to get to the bottom of it, not just for my peace of mind, but for the safety of my family. I picked up my phone and texted Rachel, "You won't believe what I just saw. I need to talk to you ASAP." Then I added another entry to my notebook. Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Chloe leaves for yoga in yellow dress, followed her to unknown apartment building, emerges in blue blouse, meets man at cafe, return home to find Chloe in kitchen in yellow dress, claiming yoga was canceled. I stared at the words I'd written, the impossible truth beginning to take shape in my mind. One Chloe at home, another Chloe at a cafe. Two identical women, both claiming to be my daughter-in-law. But who were they really, and what did they want with my family? The truth, I was beginning to realize, might be far stranger and more dangerous than anything I had imagined. That evening, I met Rachel at her house, away from curious ears. I showed her the photos I'd taken, my hands still trembling slightly. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the image of Chloe in the blue blouse with the unknown man. "I took this at 11:15 this morning, and when I got home 15 minutes later, Chloe was in the kitchen in her yellow dress, claiming her yoga class was canceled." Rachel studied the photos, her expression grave. Unless she has the ability to teleport and change clothes in seconds, these are two different women. But they look identical. Rachel, same face, same hair color, same build. The only difference was their clothing and how they wore their hair. Rachel handed the phone back to me. Have you ever heard of doppelgangers, people who look exactly alike but aren't related? I shook my head. That seems too coincidental, and it doesn't explain why this other woman would be pretending to be Chloe. What about twins? Rachel suggested. Maybe Chloe has an identical twin sister you never knew about. The idea struck me like lightning. Twinsy, that would explain the physical similarity. But why would Chloe hide that from us? From Mason? Rachel's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Maybe there's something she doesn't want your family to know. Something involving that man she was meeting. I remembered Ethan's words about seeing Chloe on the flight to Paris, sitting close to a wealthy-looking man. The woman Ethan saw on the plane was with a rich man, too. What if it's the same person? You need to find out who lives in that apartment building, Rachel said decisively. That's where the switch happened. If there are two women, that's where they're meeting. I nodded, determination replacing my fear. I'll go back tomorrow. I need to know what's happening to my family. The next morning was Sunday. Mason was home, planning to take Oliver to the park later. Chloe was in the kitchen making pancakes, the picture of domestic bliss. Today she was using her right hand to flip the pancakes, humming softly as she worked. Those smell wonderful, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Chloe smiled brightly. I added a little vanilla, the way you taught me. Oliver requested chocolate chips in his. I watched her carefully. This seemed to be the good Chloe, attentive, thoughtful, remembering small details like Oliver's preference for chocolate chips in my recipe edition. Any plans for today? I asked casually. Just family time, she replied. Although I might run to the store later if we need anything. I nodded, already planning. If she left the house, I would follow her again. The opportunity came after lunch. Chloe announced she was going to pick up a prescription at the pharmacy. I won't be long, she said, kissing Mason on the cheek. Today she was wearing a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. I waited 5 minutes, then made my excuse. I just remembered I need to drop off a book at Rachel's. I'll be back soon. Mason, engrossed in a game with Oliver, barely looked up. Drive safe, Mom. I followed Chloe at a distance, my heart pounding. Instead of heading to the pharmacy, she walked directly to the bus stop and boarded the number 17 bus heading downtown. I followed in my car, staying behind the bus until it stopped near the same neighborhood as yesterday. Chloe got off and walked quickly to the same apartment building. This time, I was prepared. I parked my car and approached the building after she went inside, looking at the names listed by the buzzers. There, on apartment 3B, was a label that made my blood run cold. It's Williams. Williams was Chloe's maiden name before she married Mason. The S could stand for a sibling, a sister perhaps. I took a photo of the name tag, then retreated to my car to wait. 20 minutes later, Chloe emerged, but again, she looked different. Now she was wearing a blue dress I'd never seen before, and her hair was down. She walked with purpose toward the main street, hailed a taxi, and disappeared. I made a split-second decision. Instead of following her, I approached the apartment building again. This time, I pressed the buzzer for 3B. Hello, a female voice answered, sounding exactly like Chloe's. My voice caught in my throat. I'm looking for the Williams residence. Who is this? The voice asked cautiously. My name is Donna Harris, I said, deciding honesty might be my best approach. I'm Mason Harris's mother. There was a long silence, then a buzz as the door unlocked. 3rd floor, the voice said, sounding resigned. My legs felt like lead as I climbed the stairs. Apartment 3B was at the end of a narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper. The door was slightly ajar. Come in, called the same voice, Chloe's voice. I pushed the door open slowly, my hand trembling. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but clean. Sitting on a worn sofa was a young woman who looked exactly like my daughter-in-law. The same delicate features, the same dark hair, the same build. The only difference was her expression, wary, nervous, and tinged with guilt. Who are you? I asked, though I was beginning to piece together the impossible truth. The woman wrung her hands. My name is Sophia Williams. I think you already know who I am. Mrs. Harris. You look exactly like Chloe, I said, stating the obvious while my mind raced. Sophia nodded. I should, considering we're identical twins. The confirmation of my suspicion hit me like a physical blow. Twins, I repeated, lowering myself into a chair. And does my son know his wife has an identical twin sister? Sophia looked down, guilt written across her face. No, no one in your family knows about me. Chloe made sure of that. Why? I demanded, finding my voice growing stronger with indignation. Why would she hide your existence from us? Before Sophia could answer, another voice joined the conversation. Because Sophia wasn't part of the plan. I turned to see a young woman standing in the doorway to what must be the bedroom. She was thin with intelligent eyes, and her hair pulled back in a practical bun. I'm Jessica Miller, Sophia's roommate, she introduced herself. And I think it's time Mrs. Harris learned the truth about what's been happening. Sophia shot Jessica a panicked look. Jess, I can't. You can and you should. Jessica interrupted firmly. This has gone on long enough. It's wrong, and you know it. I looked between them, desperate for answers. Please, just tell me what's going on. What has been happening in my home with my family? Sophia took a deep breath, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Chloe and I were separated as babies. Our parents were very poor, and they couldn't keep both of us. Chloe stayed with them, and I was adopted by the Williams family. I never knew I had a twin, she continued. I grew up in a modest home just outside Phoenix. My adoptive parents did their best, but we struggled financially. About 2 years ago, I was selling flowers at a market stall when a woman approached me, a woman who looked exactly like me. It was Chloe. She was shocked, and so was I. We talked for hours that day. She told me about her life, her marriage to Mason, your family. I told her about my struggles, about my adoptive parents mounting medical bills. My father has emphysema, and my mother has severe arthritis. Jessica interjected, her voice hard. Then Chloe saw an opportunity. Tell her what happened next. Sophia. Sophia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. A few weeks later, Chloe came to me with a proposition. She said she needed breaks from her family life sometimes. She offered to pay me to pretend to be her occasionally, just for a few hours here and there. The money was more than I could refuse. With my parents' medical expenses piling up, my heart sank as the pieces fell into place. So sometimes it's been you in my house, not Chloe. Sophia nodded miserably. At first, it was just for short periods, an afternoon here, a morning there. Chloe would coach me on family details, how to act, what to say. But lately, it's been more frequent, sometimes entire days. And where is Chloe during these times, I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. Jessica answered bluntly. With Daniel Robertson, a wealthy businessman she met last year. They've been having an affair for months. The name hit me like a slap. Daniel Robertson, the mysterious man from the cafe. The man Ethan might have seen on the plane to Paris. The flight to Paris, I murmured. That was Chloe on that plane. Wasn't it? With this Daniel person? Sophia nodded. Yes. She called me in a panic that morning. She had dropped her passport at the gate and couldn't find it. She was afraid someone would discover it and her secret would be exposed. I didn't know your other son was the pilot on that flight. I felt sick to my stomach. So all this time, when Chloe was supposedly at yoga classes or book clubs or running errands, she was with Daniel, Jessica confirmed. And Sophia was filling in, playing happy family with your son and grandson. I turned to Sophia, anger building. How could you do this, deceive my son, play with my grandson's emotions? Do you have any idea how confused Oliver has been? Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harris. I never meant to hurt anyone. At first, I told myself it was harmless, just a few hours of pretending while Chloe took some time for herself. But then it became more frequent, and I started to suspect what was really happening. When did you realize she was having an affair? I asked. About 6 months ago. Sophia admitted. I saw them together by accident. I confronted Chloe, but she threatened to stop helping with my parents' medical bills if I didn't continue our arrangement. Jessica put a protective hand on Sophia's shoulder. Sophia has been trapped. Mrs. Harris. Chloe has been using her financial desperation to manipulate her. I sat back, trying to process the enormity of the deception. My daughter-in-law had an identical twin sister no one knew about. She'd been using her sister as a stand-in while carrying on an affair with another man. My son and grandson had been living with an imposter on and off for months without realizing it. The different handwriting, I said, pieces continuing to fall into place. Chloe is right-handed, and you're left-handed. Sophia nodded. Yes. I tried to use my right hand when I remembered, but sometimes I'd forget. And the way you treated Oliver, sometimes loving, sometimes distant. I love Oliver, Sophia said earnestly, leaning forward. I truly do. When I'm with him, I try to be the best mother figure I can be. But I don't know him as well as Chloe does. I don't always know his preferences or routines. Sophia is naturally warm and patient, Jessica added. Much more so than Chloe. From what I've seen, that's why Oliver probably preferred the days when Sophia was there instead of his actual mother. The irony was painful. My grandson had been forming a deeper bond with his aunt, a woman who wasn't even supposed to be in his life, than with his own mother. What happens now? I asked, looking directly at Sophia. Will you continue this charade? Keep deceiving my family. Sophia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, I've wanted to stop for months, but I didn't know how. I need the money for my parents, but the guilt has been eating me alive, especially when Oliver started to get attached to me. He's such a sweet boy. Mrs. Harris, Jessica spoke up. That's why I convinced Sophia to talk to you. This has to end before more people get hurt. I stood up, suddenly feeling every one of my 65 years. I need proof, something concrete I can show Mason if necessary. Jessica disappeared into another room and returned with a small stack of photographs. I've been documenting this for a while, in case Sophia needed protection. Here's Chloe with Daniel at various locations, and here are some of Sophia's text messages with Chloe arranging the switches. I took the photos, my hands steady now despite the turmoil inside. Thank you for telling me the truth, both of you. As I turned to leave, Sophia called after me. Mrs. Harris, what are you going to do? I paused at the door. What any mother would do. Protect my family. Chapter 6, The Mystery House. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced with everything I'd learned. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, my son's wife, my grandson's mother, had been living a double life, using her identical twin sister as a stand-in while she carried on an affair. The betrayal cut deep, not just of Mason and Oliver, but of our entire family. We had welcomed Chloe into our home, our hearts, our lives, and she had repaid that trust with deception. Back at home, I found Mason and Oliver playing a board game in the living room. No sign of Chloe, or Sophia pretending to be Chloe. Where's Chloe? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She called and said she ran into an old friend at the pharmacy, Mason replied, moving his game piece. She's having coffee with her and will be back for dinner. I nodded, wondering which woman would walk through our door later, the real Chloe or her twin sister playing the part. I retreated to my room, needing time to think. The evidence was overwhelming, but how could I present it to Mason without destroying him? He loved Chloe. They had built a life together, had a child together. Revealing her betrayal would shatter that life. But could I stay silent? Allow this deception to continue? What about Oliver, bouncing between two different mothers without understanding why his mom's behavior was so inconsistent? I took out my phone and called Ethan. My younger son had been the first to stumble upon this mystery, and I needed his clear-headed advice. Mom, he answered on the second ring. Is everything okay? Ethan, I said, keeping my voice low. I need you to come home as soon as possible. Something serious is happening with Chloe, and I need your help. There was a pause. This is about what I saw on the plane, isn't it? Yes, and much more. How soon can you get here? I have a layover in Phoenix tomorrow. I can stay for a couple of days before my next flight. Perfect. And Ethan, don't mention this to Mason yet. I need to figure out how to handle this. After hanging up, I sat on my bed, staring at the family photos on my nightstand. Mason and Chloe on their wedding day, both beaming with happiness. Oliver as a newborn, cradled in Chloe's arms. Holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations, weekend outings, moments I had believed were genuine, but now questioned. Had it been Chloe in those moments? Or Sophia? How much of our family life had been a lie? The sound of the front door opening jolted me from my thoughts. I heard Chloe's voice greeting Mason and Oliver, followed by Oliver's excited chatter about the game he was playing with his dad. I steeled myself and went to join them, determined to observe closely. Which version of my daughter-in-law had returned Chloe was in the kitchen, unpacking groceries. Apparently, she'd stopped at the store after her coffee with a friend. She was using her right hand, her movements confident and familiar. When Oliver ran in to show her a drawing, she praised it but quickly returned to her task, her attention divided. This was the real Chloe, I was certain. Less patient, more efficient, focused more on appearances than emotional connection. Need any help? I offered, watching her reaction. No thanks. Mom, I've got it, she replied with a quick smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I picked up those steaks Mason likes for dinner. I nodded, continuing my observation. Did you enjoy catching up with your friend? Oh, yes, she said vaguely. It was nice to reconnect. Anyone I know? I pressed gently. Chloe hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Just a college friend passing through town. No one you've met? The lies came so easily to her. I wondered how many times I had accepted similar vague explanations without question. That night at dinner, I watched Chloe interact with Mason and Oliver. She was pleasant but distant, checking her phone frequently beneath the table. When Oliver spilled his milk, she sighed with irritation before cleaning it up. Her movements efficient but lacking warmth. Later, as Mason and Chloe prepared for bed, I heard them talking in their room. Their voices were low, but one phrase from Chloe drifted clearly through the wall. I might need to go to that marketing conference in San Diego next weekend after all. Another lie, I suspected. Another opportunity to spend time with Daniel Robertson while Sophia played stand-in wife and mother. The next morning, Ethan arrived. I met him at a cafe several blocks from the house, not wanting Chloe to know we were meeting. My youngest son looked tired from his flights but alert. The concern in his eyes mirrored my own. Tell me everything, he said after ordering coffee. I laid it all out. My observations. Following Chloe. Discovering Sophia. The affair with Daniel Robertson. Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. Twins, he said when I finished. That explains how she could be in two places at once. I knew I wasn't imagining things on that flight. What do we do? Ethan, how do we tell Mason? Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father, it made my heart ache. We need irrefutable proof. Mom, something Chloe can't explain away or deny. I have the photos Jessica gave me, and my own observations. We need more, Ethan insisted. Something that ties all the pieces together. We need to catch them in the act, both Chloe and Sophia. How do we do that? Ethan thought for a moment. You said Chloe is planning to attend a conference this weekend. Yes, in San Diego, supposedly. That's our opportunity. I'll bet she's meeting Daniel, and Sophia will be filling in. If we can document both of them on the same day, Chloe with Daniel and Sophia at home, we'll have our proof. I nodded slowly. Mason deserves to know the truth. No matter how painful, he does, Ethan agreed grimly. And so does Oliver. We spent the next hour planning our approach. Ethan would follow Chloe when she left for her conference, while I would stay home to document Sophia's presence. We would gather our evidence, then present it to Mason together. As painful as the revelation would be, the alternative, allowing the deception to continue, was unthinkable. Back at home, Chloe was on the phone in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. I paused in the hallway, listening. Yes, everything's arranged. No, she has no idea. Friday morning through Sunday evening. The usual arrangement. Of course I'll bring the blue dress you like. Love you too. She ended the call quickly when she heard me enter. Just confirming my hotel reservation for the conference, she said smoothly. sliding her phone into her pocket. I nodded, pretending to accept her explanation. That's nice, dear. I hope you learn a lot at the conference. Chloe smiled, but I caught the flicker of relief in her eyes. I'm sure I will. Mom? Friday morning arrived. Chloe left early, kissing Mason goodbye at the door, her overnight bag packed for her professional development weekend. Mason looked disappointed to see her go, but accepted her explanation without question. Call me tonight, he said, hugging her. Of course, she promised, her eyes not quite meeting his. Take care of Oliver. As soon as she left, Ethan followed in his rental car. I stayed behind, waiting for Sophia to arrive and take Chloe's place for the weekend. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman who looked exactly like Chloe standing there with a small bag. She was wearing a light blue dress I'd seen Chloe wear many times, her hair styled identically to how Chloe usually wore hers. Hi, Mom, she said with a warm smile that was slightly hesitant. I finished my morning sessions early and decided to come home for lunch before the afternoon workshops. Sophia, playing her part as instructed. Come in, dear, I said, letting her pass. Mason's still at work, and Oliver is at his friend Tyler's house until 3. Sophia visibly relaxed, probably glad she didn't have to maintain her act quite yet. She set her bag down and moved toward the kitchen with the familiar ease of someone who had been in this house many times before. Would you like some lunch? I offered, watching her closely. That would be nice, she replied, automatically reaching for plates with her left hand. We ate sandwiches in relative silence. I could see the guilt in her eyes every time she looked at me, knowing that I knew her secret. Sophia, I said quietly when we had finished eating, this has to stop. She froze, her eyes widening. Chloe said you wouldn't say anything, that you didn't have enough proof. I have more than enough, I replied calmly. And Ethan is gathering more as we speak. He's following Chloe to her meeting with Daniel. Sophia's shoulders slumped. I never wanted to hurt your family. Mrs. Harris, my parents need specialized medical care. And I couldn't afford it. Chloe offered money, more than I could make in months at my regular job. I understand desperation, I said gently. But this deception is hurting my son and grandson. You've seen how confused Oliver is by the inconsistent treatment. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. I love Oliver. I truly do. When I'm here, I try to give him all the love and attention I can. I read to him, play with him, listen to him. Things Chloe often doesn't make time for. That explained why Oliver sometimes preferred the nice mom. Sophia had been giving him the maternal attention Chloe was withholding. And Mason, I asked, what about deceiving my son? Sophia looked down at her hands. Chloe and I have an agreement. I leave before bedtime. I understood what she was trying to say. The deception hadn't extended to the most intimate aspects of Mason and Chloe's marriage. Small comfort, but something. I need you to tell me everything, I said. How long has this been going on? How often do you switch places? When did the affair with Daniel start? Sophia took a deep breath. Chloe found me about 2 years ago. The switching started about 18 months ago, just occasionally at first, maybe once a month for a few hours. She said she needed breaks, time for herself. But 6 months ago, it increased. That's when I realized she was seeing Daniel. I confronted her, and she admitted it. She said she'd met him at a marketing event for her firm. He's some kind of investment banker, very wealthy. They started seeing each other, and she needed me to cover for her more often. Did she ever talk about leaving Mason? I asked, dreading the answer. Sophia hesitated. She said Daniel wanted her to leave, to be with him permanently. But she was hesitant because of the prenuptial agreement. If she leaves Mason, she gets nothing. No alimony, no property. She wants to wait until Daniel proposes formally, gives her financial security. The calculated coldness of it stunned me. Chloe was playing both sides, maintaining her marriage until she was certain of a more profitable alternative. What about Oliver? I asked. Her own son. Sophia looked pained. She said Daniel isn't really a kid person, that they would figure something out. as if her child was an inconvenient detail to be resolved, not a human being who would be devastated by his mother's abandonment. "Does Mason suspect anything?" I asked. "I don't think so," Sophia replied. "He's so trusting, so devoted to her. He notices the mood changes, but he attributes them to stress or hormones. He makes excuses for her." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Followed C to airport. She's with a man matching Daniel's description. They're boarding a flight to Cabo, not San Diego. Taking photos now." I showed the message to Sophia, whose face crumpled. "She told me it was a business trip to San Diego. I'm supposed to stay here all weekend." "She lied to you too," I said gently. Sophia wiped her eyes. "What happens now?" Before I could answer, the front door opened and Mason walked in. He had come home early, unannounced. "Hey," he said, smiling at Sophia, believing her to be his wife. "Thought I'd surprise you and take the afternoon off." "Aren't you supposed to be at your conference?" Sophia froze, panic in her eyes. I stepped in smoothly. "Chloe wasn't feeling well, so she came home to rest before the afternoon sessions," I explained. "Isn't that right, dear?" Sophia nodded mutely, her face pale. Mason frowned, concerned. "You do look a bit off, honey. Maybe you should skip the conference if you're coming down with something." "Maybe," Sophia managed to say. My phone buzzed again, another text from Ethan, this time with photos attached Chloe and Daniel at the airport, boarding passes to Cabo visible in their hands, sharing an intimate kiss before boarding. I quickly tucked my phone away, but not before Mason caught the movement. "Everything okay, Mom?" he asked. "Just Rachel checking in," I lied, hating the deception but knowing this wasn't the moment for revelations. We needed Ethan here, and all our evidence compiled. The afternoon passed in tense awkwardness. Sophia tried to play her role as Chloe, but the strain showed. Mason noticed, attributing her distraction to her supposed illness. When Oliver returned from his friend's house, he ran to Sophia with a drawing. "Mom, look what I made at Tyler's." Sophia's face softened genuinely as she knelt to examine the colorful scribbles. "It's beautiful. Oliver, tell me all about it." The love in her voice was real, I realized. Whatever her motivations for participating in this deception, her affection for Oliver was genuine. By evening, Ethan had returned. He texted me from outside. "I have everything we need. Photos, boarding passes, hotel confirmation in both their names. What's the situation there?" I replied quickly. "S is here. M came home early. Very tense. Need to handle carefully." After Oliver was in bed, I suggested a family meeting in the kitchen. "Mason, Ethan has something important to discuss with us." Mason looked confused as Ethan joined us, his expression grim. Sophia sat stiffly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What's going on?" Mason asked, looking between us. "You're all acting strange." Ethan placed his phone on the table, the screen showing a photo of Chloe and Daniel boarding their flight. "Mason, I need you to look at this." Mason picked up the phone, his brow furrowing. "Is that Chloe? Who's that man? And why does it say Cabo San Lucas on the boarding gate?" "That's what we need to talk about," I said gently. "That photo was taken today, while your wife was supposedly at a conference in San Diego." Mason looked up, confusion and the first spark of anger in his eyes. "What are you saying that Chloe is lying about where she is?" He turned to Sophia. "Is this true? Are you in Cabo with some man instead of at your conference?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears, unable to maintain the charade any longer. "Mason, I'm not Chloe." Chapter 7, The Twin Secret. Mason stared at Sophia, uncomprehending. "What do you mean you're not Chloe? Of course you are." "No, Mason," I said gently. "This is Sophia Williams, Chloe's identical twin sister." Mason shook his head, disbelief written across his face. "Twin sister, that's impossible. Chloe doesn't have a sister. She would have told me." "She didn't tell anyone," Ethan said, placing more photos on the table. Pictures Jessica had given me showing Chloe and Sophia together, their identical faces unmistakable. Mason stared at the photos, his hands beginning to shake. "I don't understand. What is this?" Sophia spoke, her voice trembling. Chloe and I were separated as babies. Our parents couldn't afford to keep both of us. I was adopted by the Williams family and grew up not knowing I had a twin. Chloe found me 2 years ago at a market where I was selling flowers. And she never told me. Mason's voice rose in disbelief. She discovered she had an identical twin sister and never thought to mention it to her husband. There's more, I said softly. For the past 18 months, Chloe has been using Sophia as a stand-in. When Chloe says she's going to yoga or book club or, like now, a business conference, she's actually meeting this man. I pointed to Daniel in the photos. And Sophia comes here and pretends to be Chloe. Mason's face drained of color. He looked at Sophia with new eyes, searching her face. So sometimes when I thought I was with my wife, it was actually you. Sophia nodded miserably. I'm so sorry. Mason, I never wanted to hurt you or Oliver. Chloe was paying me to help with my parents' medical bills. They're very ill, and I couldn't afford their care. How often? Mason demanded, his voice hardening. How often have you been in my home, pretending to be my wife? It started as just occasionally, Sophia admitted. A few hours here and there. But in the last 6 months, it's been more frequent, sometimes full days. Mason stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. And this man, who is he? His name is Daniel Robertson, Ethan supplied. An investment banker. According to Sophia, Chloe has been having an affair with him for at least 6 months. Mason paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair in agitation. So my wife has been cheating on me, using her secret twin sister as a cover, and I never noticed. What kind of fool am I? You're not a fool, I said firmly. Chloe and Sophia are identical. How could you have known? But I should have noticed differences, Mason insisted. Personality changes, habits. You did notice, I reminded him. You commented on how Chloe seemed like 2 different people sometimes, moody one day, sweet the next. You just didn't know why. Understanding dawned on Mason's face. The handwriting changes, the mood swings, the inconsistent behavior with Oliver. He turned to Sophia. The days when Chloe was more attentive to Oliver, more patient with him, that was you, wasn't it? Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I love Oliver. He's such a wonderful boy. I tried to give him all the attention and love I could when I was here. And the days when Chloe was distant and irritable with him, that was the real Chloe, Mason concluded, his voice bitter. Not always, Sophia said hesitantly. Chloe can be kind and attentive too. But yes, she's generally less patient with Oliver than I am. Mason sank back into his chair, his face in his hands. My God, my whole marriage, has it all been a lie? Not all of it, Sophia said quietly. Chloe did love you, especially in the beginning. But then she met Daniel, and he offered her a lifestyle she couldn't resist. Luxury travel, expensive gifts, no responsibilities. And what about Oliver? Mason asked, his voice breaking. Does she plan to abandon her own son? Sophia looked down. She said Daniel isn't fond of children, that they would figure something out. Mason's expression hardened. Over my dead body, Oliver stays with me. Ethan put a supportive hand on his brother's shoulder. We have all the evidence, Mason, photos of Chloe with Daniel, documentation of their trip to Cabo, text messages between Chloe and Sophia arranging the switches. If you want to file for divorce, you'll have everything you need for full custody. Mason looked at the evidence spread across the table, then at Sophia. And you... What happens to you in all this? Sophia wiped her eyes. I never should have agreed to this deception. I was desperate for money to help my parents. But that's no excuse. I've grown to care deeply for Oliver. And I respect you. Mason, I'm so sorry for my part in all this. I watched my son struggle with his emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion. Then something shifted in his expression as he looked at Sophia. The times when I thought Chloe was being a better mother, a more attentive wife. That was you all along, wasn't it? Sophia nodded hesitantly. And the lullaby you sang to Oliver, Cielo Lindo, that wasn't something Chloe knew. That was you, remembering a song from your own childhood. Yes, Sophia admitted. My adoptive mother used to sing it to me. Mason's face showed the pain of realization. So the version of my wife I've sometimes preferred, the one who seemed to genuinely care about our son, wasn't even my wife at all. The room fell silent as the full weight of the deception settled around us. Years of marriage, built on a foundation that was crumbling beneath our feet. Finally, Mason stood up. I need some time to process this. I'm going for a walk. After he left, Sophia broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. I've ruined everything. I never should have agreed to this. I sat beside her, my initial anger softening in the face of her genuine remorse. You were manipulated by Chloe. She took advantage of your financial desperation. But I still participated, Sophia insisted. I lied to all of you. Yes, you did, Ethan agreed, his tone firm but not unkind. But you also showed genuine love to Oliver, which is more than his own mother has done lately. What happens now? Sophia asked, looking between us. Now we wait for Mason to decide his next steps, I said. But one thing is certain. Chloe's deception ends today. Ethan nodded grimly. I've booked a flight to Cabo tomorrow. I plan to confront Chloe in person. Let her know the game is up. Sophia looked alarmed. She'll be furious. She might try to deny everything. Let her try, Ethan said, gesturing to the evidence. We have proof of her affair, her lies, everything. It's over. As if on cue, Mason's phone on the table lit up with a text from Chloe. Conference session's running late. We'll call in the morning. Kiss Oliver goodnight for me. Another lie to add to the growing pile. Mason returned an hour later, his expression composed but determined. I want a divorce, he said simply, and full custody of Oliver. What do you want to do about Chloe right now? I asked. She thinks Sophia is here covering for her all weekend. Mason looked at Sophia. You should stay, at least until tomorrow. Maintain the pretense until Ethan can confront Chloe. If she suspects we know, she might try to damage control somehow. Sophia nodded. Of course, whatever you need. Mason turned to me. Mom, can you help me explain this to Oliver? Not everything, but enough that he understands why his mother won't be living with us anymore. Of course, I promised, my heart breaking for my grandson who would soon face a painful upheaval in his young life. That night, Sophia slept in the guest room while Mason took the couch. None of us could bear the thought of Sophia continuing the pretense in the most intimate aspects of their lives. The next morning, Ethan left for Cabo while Mason, Sophia, and I prepared to face a day of difficult conversations. We decided to start with Oliver. Mason sat his son down in the living room, with me beside him for support. Oliver, buddy, I need to talk to you about something important. Oliver looked between us, his young face already sensing something was wrong. Is it about Mom being weird sometimes? Mason smiled sadly. You're a smart kid. You know that. Yes, it's about Mom. You know how sometimes she seems like two different people? Sometimes really nice and patient, and other times not so much? Oliver nodded solemnly. Yeah, sometimes she reads me 3 stories and hugs me a lot, and sometimes she says she's too busy. Well, there's a reason for that, Mason explained gently. It turns out that Mom has an identical twin sister named Sophia. They look exactly the same, but they're different people. Oliver's eyes widened. Like the twins in my class, Emma and Olivia. Exactly like that, Mason confirmed. And sometimes when Mom was busy, Sophia would come stay with us and pretend to be Mom. So, sometimes my mom wasn't really my mom, it was her sister. Oliver was trying to process this complex situation with his 7-year-old understanding. That's right, I interjected gently. The mom who reads you lots of stories and is very patient, that was usually Sophia, your mom's sister. Oliver thought about this for a moment. I like Sophia Mom better than regular Mom, he declared with the brutal honesty of childhood. Mason winced but continued. There's something else. Buddy, Mom and I, we're not going to be living together anymore. Mom has decided she wants a different life. Are you getting a divorce like Tyler's parents? Oliver asked, his lower lip beginning to tremble. Yes, we are, Mason said, pulling his son into a hug. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault. and you'll still have me, and Grandma, and Uncle Ethan. We all love you very much." "Will I still see Mom?" Oliver asked in a small voice. Mason hesitated, unsure how to answer. "That will depend on what Mom wants. But no matter what, you'll always have people who love you and take care of you." Oliver nodded against his father's chest, processing this information in his own way. Then he looked up. "Can I still see Sophia, Mom? Sometimes I like her." Mason glanced at me, then back at his son. "We'll have to see about that, buddy, but Sophia cares about you too." Later that afternoon, Ethan called from Cabo. "I found them," he reported. "They're staying at the Casa del Mar Resort, in a luxury suite. I haven't approached them yet, but I've documented their presence with photos. They're scheduled to return Sunday evening." "Good work," Mason said. "Let me know when you confront her." The confrontation came sooner than expected. That evening, Mason's phone rang, Chloe calling from Cabo. "Mason?" Her voice was panicked. "There's been an emergency at my parents' house. A pipe burst and flooded their basement. I need to cut my conference short and go help them." Another lie, creating a pretext to return from her romantic weekend earlier than planned. "Is that so?" Mason replied, his voice cold. "That's strange, because your conference is in San Diego, but you're calling from Cabo San Lucas, and you're not with your parents. You're with Daniel Robertson in a luxury suite at Casa del Mar." Silence fell on the other end of the line. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it, Chloe," Mason said. "We know everything." "About Daniel. About your twin sister Sophia, who you've been using as your stand-in while you cheat on me. Ethan is in Cabo right now. He can see you on the resort patio from where he's standing." More silence, then a muffled conversation as Chloe presumably spoke to Daniel. Finally, her voice returned, now hard and defensive. "Fine. Yes, I'm in Cabo with Daniel. He makes me happy in ways you never could. He can give me the life I deserve." "And what about the life your son deserves?" Mason demanded. "The one where his mother is actually present and loving, not pawning him off on her secret twin sister while she runs around with another man." "Oliver will be fine," Chloe dismissed. "Children adapt, and Sophia loves playing mommy to him anyway." The casual cruelty of her words hung in the air. Mason's knuckles turned white around the phone. "When you get back," he said, his voice deadly calm, "your things will be packed and waiting. Don't bother coming to the house. My lawyer will contact you about divorce proceedings. I'm filing for full custody of Oliver." "You can't do that," Chloe protested. "I'm his mother. A mother who can't be bothered to mother," Mason retorted. "A mother who admits her boyfriend doesn't like children. A mother who has been perfectly content to let another woman raise her son while she pursues her affair. Do you really think any judge will grant you custody?" The threat of losing access to Oliver, or more likely the financial support that would come with custody, seemed to finally penetrate Chloe's defenses. "Mason, wait," she backpedaled. "We can talk about this when I get back. We can work something out." "There's nothing to work out," Mason said firmly. "It's over, Chloe. The deception, the lies, the manipulation, all of it. Come get your things on Monday. After that, all communication goes through my lawyer." He hung up before she could respond, his hands shaking with emotion. Sophia, who had been listening nearby, approached hesitantly. "I'm so sorry, Mason, I never should have—" "Stop apologizing," Mason interrupted, his voice gentler than expected. "You were manipulated too. Chloe used your financial desperation and love for your parents to force you into this situation." "But I still chose to participate," Sophia insisted. "Yes, you did," Mason acknowledged. "And that was wrong. But you also showed genuine love to my son when his own mother couldn't be bothered. That counts for something." That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Mason, Oliver, Sophia, and myself, there was a strange sense of both ending and beginning. The deception had been exposed. The marriage was over. But there was also a sense of truth finally prevailing. Oliver, resilient as children often are, seemed to be adjusting to the idea that sometimes his mom had actually been his aunt. In fact, he appeared almost relieved to have an explanation for the inconsistent behavior he'd observed. "So you're Sophia, Mom?" he asked directly. looking at Sophia across the table. She nodded, a sad smile on her face. Yes, Oliver, I'm your Aunt Sophia. I like you, he said simply. You read stories better than regular Mom. Despite the heartbreak of the situation, a small chuckle escaped from Mason. Even in the midst of family crisis, children could cut through to simple truths. What happens now? I asked as Oliver went upstairs to get ready for bed. Mason looked at Sophia thoughtfully. Sophia, what will you do? Will you stay in Phoenix? I should get back to my parents, she said. They need me, especially now that Chloe's financial support will end. I could help, Mason offered, surprising us all. Not as part of any deception, but because it's the right thing to do. Your parents shouldn't suffer because of what Chloe did. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. That's incredibly generous, Mason, especially after everything that's happened. I meant what I said to Oliver, Mason continued. You've been good to him, shown him real love and attention. That matters to me. I watched this exchange with mixed emotions. My son's marriage was ending, but he was showing remarkable compassion in the face of betrayal. And Sophia, despite her role in the deception, had genuinely cared for my grandson when her sister had not. As we prepared to face the aftermath of this family earthquake, the divorce, custody arrangements, telling friends and extended family, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had led us here. It had begun with a phone call from Ethan, noticing something impossible. It had led to the unraveling of years of deception, but also to the discovery of unexpected connections. Oliver had gained an aunt who truly loved him. Mason had found the strength to end a marriage built on lies. And I had followed my instincts to protect my family, even when the truth was almost too bizarre to believe. The road ahead would be difficult, but at least now we were walking in truth, not shadows. Sunday evening arrived with a storm brewing both outside and within our family. Rain lashed against the windows as we waited for Ethan to return from Cabo. Mason had spent the day consulting with a divorce attorney over the phone, laying the groundwork for the legal battle ahead. Sophia had returned to her apartment to check on her parents and gather her thoughts. Oliver, remarkably resilient, had spent the afternoon building a fort in the living room, seemingly adapting to the strange new reality where his mom was sometimes actually his aunt. Children possess an extraordinary ability to accept the unacceptable, I thought, watching him arrange pillows with serious concentration. Grandma, when is Uncle Ethan coming back? Oliver asked, poking his head out from his blanket fortress. Soon, sweetheart, I replied, checking my watch. His flight should be landing about now. Is Mom coming back too? His innocent question carried layers of complexity that he couldn't possibly understand. Mason looked up from his laptop, where he'd been documenting the timeline of Chloe's deception. No, buddy. Mom will be staying somewhere else when she gets back. Remember our talk about the divorce? Oliver nodded solemnly. Because Mom loves Daniel now instead of you. The blunt simplicity of children. Mason winced but nodded. Something like that. Yes. Will I still see Aunt Sophia? Oliver persisted. The bond he'd formed with his aunt, during all those times he thought she was his mother, was clearly important to him. We'll see, Oliver, Mason said, clearly unwilling to make promises he couldn't keep. That's something we'll need to figure out. The doorbell rang, startling us all. Ethan stood on the porch, rainwater dripping from his jacket, his expression grim but determined. How did it go? Mason asked as soon as Ethan stepped inside. About as well as you'd expect, Ethan replied, shrugging off his wet coat. After your phone call, Chloe and Daniel checked out of their resort early. I managed to catch them at the airport before they boarded their flight back. Uncle Ethan. Oliver launched himself at his uncle, who swept him up in a bear hug. Hey, champ, that's some fort you've got going there. You can come in if you want, Oliver offered generously. In a bit, buddy. I need to talk to your dad and Grandma first, okay? Once Oliver had returned to his fortress, the adults gathered in the kitchen, voices lowered. So you confronted her? Mason asked, his knuckles white around his coffee mug. Ethan nodded. She tried to deny everything at first, claimed I was making up stories, that Sophia was some kind of con artist trying to impersonate her. But when I showed her the photos of both of them together, the text messages, everything, she changed tactics. What did she say? I asked. She blamed Mason, if you can believe it, Ethan said, disgust evident in his voice. Said he was emotionally unavailable, too focused on work, that he'd driven her to seek comfort elsewhere. Mason's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. When that didn't work, she started threatening, Ethan continued. Said she'd fight for half of everything in the divorce, that she'd claim Mason was an unfit father to get custody of Oliver. On what grounds? I asked, indignant. She's grasping at straws, Ethan replied. Claimed Mason works too much, isn't present enough, but it's all hollow. She knows she doesn't have a leg to stand on, especially with the evidence of her affair and the twin deception. What about Daniel? Mason asked. Was he part of this confrontation? Ethan's expression darkened. He tried to play the innocent party at first, claimed he didn't know Chloe was married, that she'd told him she was divorced. But when I mentioned Oliver, he slipped up, said, and I quote, "The kid was never part of our plan." Mason's face flushed with anger. So he knew everything. They were planning this together. Seems that way, Ethan agreed. When I pressed him, he became defensive, said their relationship wasn't any of my business. But here's the interesting part. When Chloe started talking about fighting for custody, Daniel looked uncomfortable. I don't think he wants a child in the picture. Did Chloe notice his reaction? I asked. Oh yes, Ethan said grimly. And she didn't like it. They started arguing right there in the airport. I heard her say, "You promised we'd figure it out." And he replied, "I didn't sign up for full-time fatherhood." Mason leaned back, a bitter smile on his face. So her perfect plan is already falling apart. She wants to use Oliver as leverage for money, but Daniel doesn't want a child around. It gets better, Ethan added. Their argument escalated until Daniel finally said, "Maybe we should take a step back and reevaluate." Chloe looked like she'd been slapped. All this time, she's been planning her exit from her marriage, assuming Daniel was her golden ticket to a luxurious new life. But now that reality is setting in, he's getting cold feet. When are they arriving back? Mason asked. Tonight, around midnight. Chloe said she'd come by tomorrow to discuss arrangements. I think she's hoping to salvage something from this disaster. Mason's phone buzzed with a text message. He checked it, then showed us the screen. It's from Sophia. She wants to know if she can come say goodbye to Oliver before she leaves town. Leaves town? I echoed, surprised. She's leaving Phoenix. Mason nodded. She feels she can't stay after everything that's happened. Too complicated. Too painful. She's taking her parents to live with her cousin in Tucson where they can get the medical care they need. A sudden sadness washed over me. Despite her role in the deception, Sophia had shown genuine love to Oliver. Her departure would be yet another loss for my grandson. You should let her come, I said gently. For Oliver's sake. Mason hesitated, then nodded, typing a reply. I told her to come over tomorrow morning. The next day dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the emotional storm still engulfing our family. Oliver was quiet at breakfast, pushing his cereal around more than eating it. Is something wrong with your Cheerios, sweetheart? I asked. He looked up, his eyes serious. Is Aunt Sophia really my mom's twin? Yes, she is, Mason answered. They were born at the same time, to the same parents, but they grew up in different families. Like separated at birth, Oliver asked, clearly drawing from some movie or book he'd encountered. Exactly like that, Mason confirmed. And sometimes when I thought Mom was being nice to me, it was actually Aunt Sophia. Mason exchanged a glance with me before answering. Yes, buddy, your Aunt Sophia was pretending to be your mom sometimes. Oliver seemed to consider this deeply, then asked the question that had clearly been troubling him. Does that mean the mom who loved me most wasn't really my mom at all? The innocent question cut through the room like a knife. Mason looked stricken, unable to immediately form a response. I stepped in, kneeling beside Oliver's chair. Your mom loves you, Oliver. So does your Aunt Sophia. But people show love in different ways. Your aunt was very good at showing her love through attention and care. Oliver nodded slowly, processing this in his 7-year-old way. Sophia Mom read me 3 stories every night and never said she was too busy. Real Mom always had important things to do. Before we could respond to this heartbreaking observation, the doorbell rang. Sophia stood on the porch, looking nervous and sad. "Come in," Mason said formally. Stepping aside, Sophia entered hesitantly, her eyes immediately finding Oliver. "Hi, Oliver. Aunt Sophia." He ran to her, hugging her around the waist. "Dad says you're my mom's twin, like in the movies." A small, sad smile touched her lips as she knelt to his level. "That's right. I'm your Aunt Sophia." "Are you leaving?" Oliver asked, surprising us all with his perception. Sophia glanced up at Mason before answering. "Yes, I am. I need to take care of my parents, your grandparents. Actually, though you haven't met them, they're not well, and they need to move somewhere with better doctors." "But you'll come back to visit, right?" Oliver persisted. "You can still read me stories sometimes." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "I don't know. Oliver, that will be up to your dad." All eyes turned to Mason, who stood rigid, clearly torn between his anger at the deception and recognition of the bond between his son and his aunt. "We'll see," he said finally. "Right now, everyone needs some time." Sophia nodded, understanding the unspoken message. She turned back to Oliver, taking his hands in hers. "I want you to know something. Oliver, even when I was pretending to be your mom, the love I felt for you was real. Never pretend. You're an amazing little boy, and I've treasured every story we've read together, every drawing you've made for me, every hug you've given me." Oliver, with the directness of children, asked, "If you love me, why are you leaving?" Sophia's tears spilled over. "Sometimes adults have to make hard choices, even when they don't want to. But I'll always remember you, and I'll always care about you." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "I brought you something to remember me by." Oliver unwrapped it eagerly, revealing a handmade book. "What is it?" "It's a storybook," Sophia explained. "I wrote it for you. It's about a brave knight named Sir Oliver who goes on adventures and helps people." Oliver's face lit up as he flipped through the pages, admiring the colorful illustrations Sophia had drawn herself. "Whenever you miss me, you can read this book and remember that I'm thinking of you," Sophia said softly. I watched this exchange with a lump in my throat. Whatever mistakes Sophia had made, her love for Oliver was genuine. In some ways, she had been more of a mother to him than Chloe had. After Oliver went to play with his new book, Sophia turned to Mason. "I've written down everything I know about Chloe's affair, the timeline of when I stood in for her, all of it. It might help with your divorce case." She handed him a thick envelope. "Thank you," Mason said stiffly. Sophia hesitated. "I also want you to know that I never shared your private information with Chloe. She would ask me to report back on conversations, on your work, but I always kept it vague. It felt wrong." Mason's expression softened slightly. "You were put in an impossible position." "Sophia, I understand that now. That doesn't excuse what I did," she insisted. "I should have refused from the beginning, no matter how much I needed the money." "For what it's worth," Mason said quietly. "The version of my wife that Oliver loved most, that was you." Sophia looked down, unable to respond to the complex emotion behind that statement. Finally, she said, "I should go. My parents are waiting in the car." "Wait," I said, making a sudden decision. "I want to meet them." Sophia looked surprised. "My parents?" "Yes, they're Oliver's grandparents too, in a way. And they're your family, which means—" I trailed off, unsure how to define this strange new connection. Sophia led us outside to where an old sedan was parked at the curb. In the passenger seat sat an elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes. The back seat held a frail-looking man with an oxygen tank. I approached the car, smiling warmly. "Hello, I'm Donna Harris." The woman looked confused but returned my smile. "Martha Williams, this is my husband, George." "I'm Mason," my son said, joining us. And this is Oliver. Martha's eyes widened as she looked at Oliver. He has Sophia's smile, our Sophia's smile. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea before your trip? I offered impulsively. Sophia looked at Mason questioningly. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, please join us. With careful movements, we helped George from the car and into the house. Oliver, fascinated by the oxygen tank, asked a stream of innocent questions that George answered with patient humor. Over tea, Martha shared stories of Sophia's childhood, her kindness even as a little girl, her talent for drawing, her determination to care for others. George, between labored breaths, spoke of his pride in the daughter who had sacrificed so much to care for them. We never knew Sophia had a twin, Martha admitted. The adoption agency told us she was the only child available. If we had known... It's not your fault, I assured her. You gave her a loving home. That's what matters. As we talked, I found myself warming to these good people who had raised Sophia with strong values. Despite their limited means, they were as much victims of circumstance as anyone in this tangled situation. When it was time for them to leave, I made another impulsive decision. I'd like to help with your medical expenses. Martha looked startled. Oh, we couldn't possibly... Please, I insisted. It would mean a lot to me. You're Oliver's family too, in a roundabout way. Mason, understanding my intention, added, We want to help, not as part of any arrangement or obligation, but because it's the right thing to do. Sophia's eyes filled with tears again. That's incredibly generous, especially after everything that's happened. We exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch about their medical needs, as they prepared to leave. Oliver gave Sophia one last hug. Will you call me sometimes? He asked hopefully. Sophia looked to Mason, who nodded slightly. Yes, Oliver, I'll call you. And maybe someday, when things are less complicated, I can visit. After they drove away, the house felt strangely empty. Oliver retreated to his room with his new storybook, while Mason and I sat in silence, processing the emotional morning. That was a kind thing you did, Mason said finally, offering to help with their medical bills. They're good people, I replied simply. And they're part of Oliver's extended family, whether we planned it that way or not. Mason sighed heavily. This whole situation is so bizarre. My wife's secret twin sister turns out to be more loving to my son than his own mother. Now they're leaving, and he's losing the person who's shown him the most maternal love, even though that person was pretending to be someone else. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. How do I explain this to a 7-year-old when I can barely understand it myself? One day at a time, I advised, patting his hand. Oliver is resilient, and he has us, his father and his grandmother who love him without complication or deception. The doorbell rang again, interrupting our conversation. Mason tensed, checking his watch. That's probably Chloe. He was right. Chloe stood on the porch, looking tired but defiant. Gone was the floral dress and gentle demeanor she typically wore at home. Instead, she was dressed in an expensive-looking pantsuit, her hair pulled back severely, makeup perfect despite her obvious fatigue. Mason, she said coolly as he opened the door. We need to talk. Yes, we do, he agreed, his voice equally cold. Come in. Oliver, hearing his mother's voice, appeared at the top of the stairs. Mom, Chloe looked up, her expression softening slightly. Hello, Oliver. Are you real mom or Sophia mom? He asked bluntly. The question seemed to physically strike Chloe. She blinked rapidly, then composed herself. I'm your real mother. Oliver, Aunt Sophia has gone away. I know, Oliver said. She gave me a book. He held up the storybook proudly. She wrote it just for me. A flash of something, jealousy, anger, crossed Chloe's face before she smoothed it away. That's nice, honey. Could you go play in your room for a while? The grown-ups need to talk. Once Oliver had retreated, Chloe turned to Mason. I assume you've already consulted a lawyer? Yes, Mason confirmed. The divorce papers are being drawn up as we speak. Chloe nodded. All business now. I want to be clear about my expectations. I'm entitled to half of our marital assets, regardless of the circumstances. Your affair and elaborate deception might influence how a judge views those entitlements, Mason pointed out. Perhaps, Chloe conceded, but I'm Oliver's mother. That's not in dispute. A mother who has been perfectly content to let another woman raise her son while she pursues an affair, Mason countered. Your sister has spent more quality time with Oliver in the past 6 months than you have. Chloe's composure slipped. Don't throw Sophia in my face. She was paid help, nothing more. Paid help who loves your son more than you seem to, I interjected, unable to remain silent. Chloe turned to me, eyes flashing. Stay out of this, Donna. This is between Mason and me. No, it's not, Mason said firmly. This affects our entire family. You've lied to all of us, manipulated all of us. You don't get to dictate the terms now. Fine, Chloe snapped. Let's get to the point. I want shared custody of Oliver. Mason's eyebrows rose. Really, just yesterday at the airport, your boyfriend made it clear he wasn't interested in having a child around. What changed? Chloe faltered momentarily. Daniel and we're working through some differences of opinion, but my relationship with him doesn't affect my rights as Oliver's mother. It does when you've demonstrated that you're willing to prioritize that relationship over your son's well-being, Mason argued. I'll be filing for full custody. Chloe, you can have visitation rights, but Oliver's primary residence will be with me. You can't do that, Chloe protested. No judge will take a child from his mother. They might when presented with evidence that the mother regularly abandoned her child to pursue an affair, using her identical twin as a stand-in, Mason replied calmly. Not to mention the psychological impact on Oliver of your inconsistent presence in his life. Chloe's face paled as the reality of her situation began to sink in. I love Oliver, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. In your own way, perhaps, Mason acknowledged. But love isn't just a feeling, Chloe. It's actions. It's being present. It's putting someone else's needs before your own. By that measure, how much have you really loved our son lately? Chloe had no answer for that. She shifted tactics. My things packed in boxes in the garage, Mason replied. Personal items only. Anything we jointly own stays until the court decides asset division. Chloe nodded stiffly. I'll have them picked up tomorrow. I'm staying at Daniel's for now. Still think he's your ticket to the good life? Mason couldn't resist asking. He seemed pretty quick to reevaluate when faced with the reality of being a stepfather. My relationship with Daniel is none of your business, Chloe said coldly. It is when it affects my son, Mason countered. Chloe's phone buzzed. She checked it, then stood abruptly. I have to go. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Aren't you going to say goodbye to Oliver? I asked incredulously. Chloe hesitated, then sighed. I'll come back another time when things are calmer. He's confused right now with all this talk of real mom and Sophia mom. He's confused because his mother has been inconsistently present in his life, replaced by an aunt he didn't know existed. Mason pointed out. But sure, leave without saying goodbye. It's certainly in character. Chloe flinched at that, but didn't respond. With a final cool nod, she left, the door closing firmly behind her. She didn't even ask to see Oliver, I said, disbelief coloring my voice. Her own son. Mason's expression was grim. I don't think she's fully processing what's happening yet. Her perfect plan is falling apart. Daniel's having second thoughts. Her leverage for a favorable divorce settlement is evaporating, and she's facing the real possibility of losing primary custody of Oliver. What do we tell Oliver? I asked, concerned for my grandson who was surely wondering why his mother had come and gone without seeing him. The truth, as much as he can understand it, Mason decided, that Mom and Dad are getting divorced, that he'll be living with me, and that he'll see Mom sometimes but not every day. As Mason went upstairs to talk to Oliver, I sat heavily on the couch, emotionally drained. The past few days had been a whirlwind of revelations and confrontations. Our family had been irreversibly changed, relationships redefined, trust shattered and rebuilt in unexpected ways. Yet amid the wreckage of Mason's marriage, I could see the first tentative signs of healing. The truth, painful as it was, had freed us from the web of deception. Mason, though heartbroken, was standing firm in his commitment to Oliver. And Oliver, resilient child that he was, seemed to be adapting to his new reality with remarkable grace. Even the unexpected connection with Sophia and her parents felt like a positive development, a silver lining in the dark cloud of Chloe's betrayal. They were good people caught in a bad situation, and helping them felt right, a small way to restore balance to a world turned upside down. 3 months passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The divorce proceedings moved forward, with Chloe eventually agreeing to give Mason primary custody of Oliver in exchange for a more favorable financial settlement. Her relationship with Daniel had indeed faltered in the face of reality. He had signed up for a carefree affair with an apparently single woman, not the messy complications of a divorce and a stepchild. Weekly visits with Oliver were established, but Chloe often canceled at the last minute, citing work commitments or other obligations. Each cancellation brought a mixture of disappointment and relief to Oliver, who had come to associate his real mom with unpredictability and emotional distance. Sophia and her parents had settled in Tucson, where both Martha and George were receiving improved medical care, thanks in part to our financial assistance. Sophia called Oliver once a week, their conversations filled with stories and shared jokes. These calls became a highlight of Oliver's week, a bright spot he looked forward to with genuine enthusiasm. Mason threw himself into being a single father, adjusting his work schedule to be more present for Oliver. I stayed on to help with the transition, grateful that my presence seemed to provide stability for both my son and grandson during this tumultuous time. One Sunday afternoon, as Mason and Oliver played catch in the backyard, the phone rang. It was Sophia, calling earlier than her usual scheduled time. "Donna, is this a bad time?" Her voice sounded hesitant. "Not at all, dear. Is everything all right?" "Yes, everything's fine. Actually, better than fine. I've been offered a teaching position at an elementary school here in Tucson, art therapy for children with special needs." "That's wonderful," I exclaimed, genuinely happy for her. "You'll be wonderful at that." "Thank you," she said, the smile evident in her voice. "There's something else, though. The school has a summer program starting next month, and I was wondering, do you think Mason would allow Oliver to visit for a week? The program is open to all children, and I thought he might enjoy it." I hesitated, unsure how Mason would feel about Oliver spending time with Sophia. Their relationship remained complicated, gratitude for her genuine care of Oliver mixed with lingering resentment over her role in the deception. "I can ask him," I offered. "He's right here." Mason came in, wiping sweat from his brow. "Who is it, Sophia?" I said, covering the receiver. "She's been offered a teaching position in Tucson, art therapy for children. She's wondering if Oliver might visit for a week this summer to participate in a program she's running." Mason's expression was unreadable. "Let me talk to her." I handed him the phone, watching as he listened to Sophia explain her request. His responses were brief, but not unfriendly. Finally, he said, "Let me discuss it with Oliver and get back to you." After hanging up, Mason called Oliver in from the backyard. "Aunt Sophia has invited you to visit her in Tucson for a week this summer. She's teaching an art program for kids, and she thought you might like to participate. What do you think?" Oliver's face lit up. "Really, I can go see Aunt Sophia." "If you want to," Mason said carefully. "It would be for a week, and you'd be staying with Aunt Sophia and her parents, your other grandparents." "Yes," Oliver exclaimed without hesitation. "Can I go? Dad, please?" Mason looked at his son's excited face, then at me. I nodded encouragingly. "All right," Mason decided. "We'll work out the details with Aunt Sophia." Oliver whooped with joy, running in circles around the kitchen. "I'm going to Tucson. I'm going to see Aunt Sophia." After Oliver had run off to draw a picture for Sophia, Mason sank into a chair. "Am I doing the right thing?" he asked quietly. "I think so." I replied honestly. Sophia loves Oliver, and he clearly loves her. Whatever mistakes she made, she's trying to make amends and build something positive. "It's just so strange," Mason said, shaking his head. "My ex-wife's secret identical twin, who pretended to be my wife while my actual wife was cheating on me. is now going to be hosting my son for a visit. How did our lives become this complicated? Life rarely follows the paths we expect, I said, patting his hand. But sometimes the unexpected turns lead us to better places. The week of Oliver's visit to Tucson arrived in late June. Mason had arranged to take time off work to drive him there, a 4-hour journey that would give father and son quality time together. As they prepared to leave, I hugged Oliver tightly. "Have a wonderful time with Aunt Sophia, sweetheart. Call us every day." "I will, Grandma," he promised, his backpack stuffed with clothes, toys, and the storybook Sophia had made him, now well worn from frequent reading. "Are you sure you don't want me to come along?" I asked Mason. He shook his head. "I think this is something I need to do myself. Sophia and we need to establish some kind of relationship for Oliver's sake. It won't be easy, but it's necessary." I understood. Mason needed to make peace with Sophia, to find a way forward that acknowledged both the pain of her deception and the genuine love she had shown his son. 3 days into Oliver's visit, I received a call from Mason, who had returned to Phoenix after dropping Oliver off. "How's it going?" I asked. "Have you heard from Oliver?" "Every night," Mason confirmed. "He's having the time of his life. The art program is fantastic. They're making sculptures and murals and all sorts of creative projects. And Sophia," he paused. "Yes, she's amazing with the kids, patient, encouraging, genuinely interested in their ideas. Oliver said she's the favorite teacher of every child in the program." "That doesn't surprise me," I said. "She has a natural gift with children." "Mom," Mason said hesitantly, "I've been thinking about Sophia, about everything that happened. I was so angry at her for her part in the deception. But being there, seeing her with the children, with Oliver, I'm starting to see things differently." "How so?" "She was manipulated by Chloe, used because of her financial desperation. And despite that, she showed more genuine love to Oliver than his own mother often did." He sighed deeply. "I'm not excusing what she did, but I'm beginning to understand it better." "That's a healthy perspective," I observed. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or condoning, just choosing to move forward without the burden of anger." "Exactly," Mason agreed. "And for Oliver's sake, I want to have a positive relationship with Sophia. She's important to him." The week of Oliver's visit stretched into 2, with Mason's blessing. When they finally returned home, Oliver was bursting with stories about his adventures in Tucson, the art projects he'd created, the friends he'd made, the ice cream shop Sophia had taken him to every afternoon. "And Grandma Martha taught me to make cookies," he exclaimed. "And Grandpa George showed me all his old coins from when he was a sailor." "Sounds like you had a wonderful time," I said, hugging him close. "The best can I go again next summer. Aunt Sophia said they're going to have an even bigger program next year with music, too." Mason smiled at his son's enthusiasm. "We'll see, buddy, but I think that could probably be arranged." Later that evening, after Oliver had gone to bed, Mason shared more of his thoughts with me. Being around Sophia was strange at first, seeing Chloe's face but with such a different personality behind it. But after a while, I stopped seeing Chloe when I looked at her. Sophia is her own person, with her own mannerisms, her own way of speaking, her own kindness. I nodded, understanding. Twins may look alike, but they're distinct individuals. "Exactly," Mason agreed. And watching her with Oliver, he trailed off, lost in thought. "What?" I prompted gently. "She loves him, Mom, truly loves him, in a way Chloe never seemed to. And he adores her." He sighed heavily. "It's just complicated." "Life usually is," I replied. Over the next several months, our new family dynamic slowly stabilized. Chloe's visits with Oliver became less frequent, often canceled in favor of weekend trips with friends or work events. When she did see Oliver, their interactions were pleasant but somewhat superficial, more like a favorite aunt than a mother. Sophia, meanwhile, became a regular presence in Oliver's life through weekly video calls, care packages filled with art supplies and books, and occasional visits when her teaching schedule allowed. She was careful to respect Mason's boundaries, never overstepping her role as Aunt Sophia, but her genuine affection for Oliver was evident in everything she did. Mason's initial wariness gradually softened into a cautious friendship. They would talk during Oliver's video calls, exchanging updates and parenting insights. Sometimes they would speak separately, after Oliver had gone to bed, conversations that grew longer and more personal as the months passed. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Mason approached me with an unexpected question. "Mom, would it be weird if I invited Sophia to Oliver's birthday party next month?" "I don't think so," I replied carefully. "She's his aunt, after all. Why would it be weird?" Mason ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture. Because I think I might be developing feelings for her." I stared at him, taken aback. "Feelings as in I find myself looking forward to our conversations. As in I admire her kindness, her creativity, her genuine love for Oliver. As in I sometimes forget she looks exactly like my ex-wife because she's so completely different in every way that matters." "Oh," I said, processing this unexpected development. "And how do you feel about these feelings?" "Confused," Mason admitted. "Is it weird to be attracted to my ex-wife's identical twin? Is it some kind of transference, or am I seeing the real Sophia and responding to who she actually is?" "Only you can answer that," I said gently. "But from what I've observed, Sophia is indeed a remarkable woman in her own right. The fact that she shares Chloe's appearance is just biology. Everything else about her, her character, her values, her heart, is uniquely her own." Mason nodded slowly. "That's how I see it too. But it's complicated." "Life usually is," I repeated, patting his hand. "Just take it slow. See where it leads." The birthday party was a success, with Oliver surrounded by friends from school, neighbors, and family. Chloe attended briefly, arriving with an expensive gift and leaving early for a prior commitment. Sophia stayed the entire day, helping with games, serving cake, and cleaning up afterward. I watched the interactions between Mason and Sophia with interest. There was a cautious warmth there, a tentative connection growing despite the bizarre circumstances that had brought them together. They moved around each other with a careful awareness, their gazes meeting and then darting away, like two people afraid to acknowledge a shared secret. After the party, as Sophia prepared to return to Tucson, I overheard a conversation between her and Mason on the porch. "Thank you for including me today," Sophia said softly. "It meant a lot to be here for Oliver." "You're important to him," Mason replied. "And to me." A brief silence fell. "Mason?" Sophia began hesitantly. "I know this is strange, all of it. My relationship with Oliver, with you, it developed under false pretenses, through deception. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to maintain distance, to set firm boundaries." "Life rarely follows the paths we expect," Mason said, echoing my earlier words to him. "Sometimes the unexpected turns lead us to better places." "Even when those turns involve identical twins and elaborate deceptions?" Sophia asked, a hint of humor in her voice. "Even then," Mason confirmed. "Sophia, I've come to value your presence in Oliver's life, and in mine. You're not defined by Chloe's actions or by the circumstances that brought you into our lives. You're your own person. And that person is someone I'd like to know better." "I'd like that too," Sophia admitted. "But slowly, carefully. Oliver comes first. Always." "Always," Mason agreed. As they continued talking, voices lowered, I slipped away, giving them privacy. Whatever was developing between them would need time, patience, and careful navigation. But I felt a spark of hope that something beautiful might emerge from the ashes of deception. Chapter 10, Full Circle. 1 year after the fateful phone call from Ethan that had unraveled Chloe's deception, our family gathered for a special dinner. Sophia had accepted a permanent position at her school in Tucson, but had also been offered the opportunity to establish a satellite program in Phoenix. She would be moving back, dividing her time between both cities. Oliver was ecstatic at the news that his beloved Aunt Sophia would be nearby. Mason, though trying to maintain a casual demeanor, couldn't hide his pleasure either. Their friendship had deepened over the months. cautiously evolving into something more, though both were careful to take things slowly for Oliver's sake. Martha and George Williams would be staying in Tucson, where they had established relationships with their medical providers and had joined a senior community they enjoyed, but they would visit Phoenix regularly, their bond with Oliver having grown into a genuine grandparent relationship. Chloe had moved to Los Angeles with a new boyfriend, an entertainment lawyer she'd met through Daniel, who had indeed reevaluated their relationship shortly after the divorce was finalized. Her visits with Oliver had dwindled to holidays and occasional weekends, a situation that seemed to suit both mother and son. As we sat around the table that evening, Mason, Oliver, Sophia, Ethan home between flights, and myself, I looked at our unconventional family with a sense of wonder. A year ago, we had been living in a web of lies, unaware of the deception at the heart of our family. Now, through pain and truth and healing, we had emerged stronger, our bonds restructured but genuine. I'd like to make a toast, I said, raising my glass. To truth, to healing, and to the family we choose. To family, everyone echoed, glasses clinking. After dinner, as Mason and Sophia washed dishes side by side, their movements in comfortable synchrony, Oliver sat beside me on the porch swing. "Grandma," he said thoughtfully, "do you think Dad might marry Aunt Sophia someday?" The question caught me by surprise. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" He shrugged. "Because they smile at each other a lot, and Dad laughs more now. And I heard Dad telling Uncle Ethan that Sophia makes him happy in ways he never knew were possible." Out of the mouths of babes. "Would that be okay with you if someday far in the future they decided to get married?" Oliver considered this seriously. "I think so. Aunt Sophia already feels like my real mom anyway. She always has time for me, and she listens to what I say, and she never cancels when we're supposed to do something together." My heart ached a little at his simple assessment of what made a real mother, basic reliability and attention that Chloe had failed to provide consistently. "Plus," Oliver added, "she makes the best chocolate chip cookies ever." I laughed, hugging him close. That is indeed an important quality. Later that night, after Oliver was in bed, Mason, Sophia, Ethan and I sat in the living room, talking quietly about the future. Sophia would be moving to Phoenix the following month, renting an apartment near the school where she would establish her art therapy program. "It feels right," she said, looking around at all of us. "A year ago, I was trapped in Chloe's deception, using my resemblance to her to deceive all of you. Now I'm coming back as myself, building something positive." "Life has a strange way of coming full circle," Ethan observed. "A year ago, I called Mom because I saw Chloe on my flight when she was supposedly at home. That one observation unraveled everything." "Thank goodness you noticed," Mason said, reaching over to squeeze his brother's shoulder. "Without that phone call, who knows how long the deception might have continued." "I've been thinking about that day a lot," I admitted. "About how one phone call changed everything. It was painful, discovering the truth, but necessary." "The truth will set you free," Sophia quoted softly. "My adoptive father used to say that." He was right, Mason agreed, though the process isn't always easy. As the evening wound down, Ethan left for his hotel, needing to catch an early flight the next morning. I excused myself to bed, leaving Mason and Sophia talking quietly on the porch. From my bedroom window, I could see them sitting side by side on the porch swing, their profiles illuminated by the soft porch light. They weren't touching, maintaining the careful boundaries they had established, but there was an unmistakable connection between them, a shared understanding, a mutual respect, and the tentative beginnings of something deeper. Whatever the future held for them, friendship or something more, it would be built on honesty, not deception, on genuine connection, not manipulation, on the truth of who they were, not the shadows of resemblance. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Our family had weathered a storm of deception and emerged stronger, wiser, and more authentically connected than before. The truth had indeed set us free. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and let me know the city you're watching from. Meanwhile, I'm leaving you with 2 other stories that are channel favorites. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.